All right, here's our very important and I hope interesting presentation on climate change. Take all the notes on the pink slides and here we go. A couple learning goals. You can pause here if you want to get an idea of what you have to know by the end of this. But here's where it is important. There is a natural cycle of carbon in our world, and that is that balance between that photosynthesis and cellular respiration reaction. That is all we need on our planet to keep carbon and oxygen in our atmosphere and where it's supposed to be. The problem is we are upsetting this natural balance because of things we are doing, mostly burning fossil fuels. When you burn fossil fuels, you are taking carbon-based organisms. Everything that's alive is made of carbon. They've been buried for millions of years, and we're bringing them up to the surface where they don't belong. So we're adding carbon to this balance, and we don't need it up here. So that excess carbon dioxide is actually adding to our greenhouse effect, which I will explain. It is causing environmental changes, and those have been monitored and measured, and the data is well accepted. And even though it might not be a big deal right now, the data does show that these problems will get worse if we don't figure out a solution. Right now, the only way to get carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere is plants doing photosynthesis. So part of our solution is, can we find another way to get carbon dioxide out? A couple little background vocab words. Please understand that weather is what it's doing one day. Climate is long-term trends in weather conditions. So if we have a really cold couple days this winter, and you go out and say, well, climate change isn't happening because look how cold it is, you're talking about weather. So you need to monitor the weather during the season for years and years and years and look for long-term trends before you talk about climate change. So make sure you know what you're talking about. Lots of weird things happen. Weather can get crazy for a day or two, but long-term changes is what we're trying to pay attention to. All right, in order to understand our climate, you have to understand how the greenhouse effects works. The greenhouse effect is radiation comes down from the sun. Some of it is absorbed by our planet. Some of that radiation bounces back and it hits molecules that exist in our atmosphere. Some of these molecules can radiate that heat back to Earth. They radiate it in all directions, but they also radiate it back to Earth. So they actually trap that heat because they bounce it right back. These gases make a little blanket around our planet. Because of that blanket, we have a warm planet and we have a green planet. So the greenhouse effect is 100% natural and absolutely necessary to make life on Earth. The problem is if we have too thick of a blanket up here, the planet gets too warm, and that affects the natural processes that are supposed to be happening. What are the greenhouse gases? There are 4 of them, but carbon dioxide is the only one we really care about. So methane exists. It comes from farming practices, burning fuels, and taking care of garbage. Nitrous oxide comes from fires. It also comes from lightning, and it comes from creating fuel. Carbon dioxide comes mostly from burning fossil fuels, and water vapor is there. We cannot get rid of the water on our planet. Carbon dioxide is the only greenhouse gas people usually talk about because it is the one that can be most easily controlled. So we're going to talk about that in a minute. Okay, in order to understand the greenhouse effect, you need to understand positive and negative feedback loops. Most importantly, positive. A positive feedback loop is when the outcome of a reaction makes the reaction keep going. An example of this would be if a cow starts running, that cow makes other cows panic, which makes more cows run, which makes more cows panic, which makes more cows run. So the results of the reaction make the reaction keep going. Another example would be a street fight. If you came up and punched me, I'm going to punch you back. So you'll punch me, so I'll punch you back, and you'll punch me, and I'll punch you back. And the fight will just escalate. Obviously, there would be an end. Okay, to any of these examples, something would happen and everything would stop. The cows would run out of energy. In the street fight, somebody ends up knocked out, and so it stops. So eventually, there's always a negative loop that happens, where the outcome of the reaction makes the reaction stop. It's usually because it hits a threshold. So you've hit enough punches or the cows run out of energy. Another example of positive loop would be the uterus contracting during labor It also happens when a mother is breastfeeding a baby, and I will spare you all those details just for time. So this is how it works on our planet. We have carbon dioxide that exists in the atmosphere and it's supposed to be there. Because that carbon dioxide is there, heat gets radiated back to Earth. When our planet gets warm, water evaporates. Water is a greenhouse gas. When we get more water in the atmosphere, it actually makes our planet warmer, which makes more water evaporate, which makes our planet warmer, which makes more water evaporate, which makes our planet warmer. So if we have a certain amount of gas over here, this keeps on going. It's never going to stop. The only thing we can do to get rid of this positive loop is to actually reduce and remove carbon dioxide from our air. We have too much of it here. We need to stop all this excess evaporation. But this is why it's such a problem. Even if we stopped putting out excess carbon dioxide today, we would still have this positive loop cycle that keeps on going because we can't get rid of water vapor on our planet. So if that doesn't make sense, ask me in class and I will go over it a little bit slower, but I do need you to understand how this effect is a positive loop, the fact that it keeps on going and it will not stop until we stop this stimulus up here. Why do we care about this? We have some extremes going on. Oh, there I am. Look, I wasn't showing up. Venus has 300 times the carbon dioxide we have, and it is a boiling hot planet. Carbon has basically no carbon dioxide and it's freezing. We are the Goldilocks planet, and we exist right here in the middle of these two extremes. Here's some data to show you why we should care. So scientists can look at carbon dioxide in ice samples from the Arctic. Ice layers itself, kind of like trees have a layer every year. The ice in the Arctic layers every year. So they can count back in these layers and open up bubbles of gas in the ice and measure how much carbon dioxide was present. So this is our tracking of carbon dioxide from 400,000 years ago up to today. According to the ice sheet data, we have never had carbon levels as high as we have right now. It's not super high, but it is increasing and it's not going down. Other data that scientists have taken, and just for the record, 99% of all climate scientists across the globe agree that these charts are accurate. But as carbon dioxide increases, we're also seeing a trend in increasing global annual temperatures. So there is some correlation there. And why is it a big deal? Keep in mind that our last ice age, the world or global climate was only 5 to 9 degrees cooler. If we increase 10 degrees, which would be the max they're expecting, think of how much hotter it can get. If 5 to 9 degrees covered us in a sheet of ice, what's going to happen if we get that amount hotter? So what does it mean? This is important. As these temperatures rise, and we are already seeing this, there are more droughts, there are more wildfires, we have more extreme weather events. If you look at any data, there is tracking of how many droughts and wildfires have occurred over the last 100 years, how many storms happen over the last 100 years, and these numbers are going up all the time. Sea levels are rising. This is something that can be measured. So this is all quantitative data. You can't really deny that it's happening. Because of all these changes, we know that species, their environment will change. They won't be able to adapt or evolve as quickly as the climate is changing, which means those species will go extinct and we lose biodiversity, which we also know is super important. Why else should we care? Look at how dirty this air is. That's the pollution above Houston. In China, some of their cities are so polluted that the people wear masks all the time, not because of viruses, but because the air is so dirty. We need to stop this. Here's another big problem. Because of shipping, most big cities were started along coastlines. 40% of everybody in the world lives along an ocean coast. If sea levels rise, we could lose all of those cities. So here's a worst case scenario. If all of the ice in the Arctic melts, sea levels will rise to this point. Look at all of these big cities that are underwater. This is our country. Where are all those people going to go? They're going to immigrate into where we live. Do we need all the people that live in these highly populated cities to move into the Midwest? That's going to affect our lifestyle And then we've got basic immigration questions. Do we let these Americans who got flooded out move to Minnesota? Or do we say Minnesota is our land and we don't want these Americans moving in with us? So some things to think about. Again, this is an extreme map. This would be worst case scenario. Some things that we are seeing though, this is Glacier National Park 150 years ago. Here's Glacier National Park about 20 years ago, 15 years ago. It's not really a glacier park anymore. It's just a bunch of mountains that are super beautiful. I've been there and I can tell you that there are no glaciers. There's some snow-capped peaks, but the glaciers are all pretty much gone. Here's another view. So same time of year, 1979 polar ice, 2007 polar ice. So more data to show you that polar ice is changing. And because it's the same month of the year, you can't even say, oh, well, this was a winter picture and this is summer. It's the same. It is always important to see both sides of the story. I'm not going to play this right now, but we can in class. But there are skeptics about climate change, and they have their points. So I encourage you to look at both sides. But because most scientists agree with climate data, we are teaching that in this class. What happens in Minnesota? We will also see some change. It will get hotter. We will have heavier rain, and I've seen both of this since I've lived here for 25 years. If all this happens, it will affect infrastructure. It will affect our health. It will affect agriculture, forestry, all the jobs that go with that, and it can change the ecosystems in the Great Lakes. So we need to care about climate changing too quickly. So why do we study the environment? Basically, we want our stuff. We need to feed the world without destroying it. We want our comforts. I want air conditioning. I want nice clothes. I want to fly on an airplane. I want to have a car. Can we do all of that and not destroy our environment? Can we keep our air clean and our soil clean? And we can. The biggest solution to this would be to change our source of power. If we stop burning fossil fuels, we can have all these things we want without putting pollution into the sky. And we will talk about this later, but these are all the ideas for changing energy sources. So ways that we can move a generator without burning coal or gas. Other things we can do to prevent carbon emissions is change our diet. If you look at this graph, these bars here are the amount of carbon dioxide emitted during production. Plants emit, and this is planting them, processing them, shipping them. To produce plants for us to eat, they emit very few gases. To produce meat for us to eat, there's a lot of carbon produced in the process. And just a little bit of humor to end this. Cockroaches have been around since the beginning of our planet, and they have never gone extinct. We call ourselves a successful species, but if we aren't careful, we will cause the extinction of the human race. So some good things to think about there, and we will talk about this a little bit in class.